Hello, everyone. We are live on the internet, and there are people here. Allegedly, anyway. I hear there are people here. I see people. So, welcome to the Lunch Zone. Before we get too far into the show, we would like to acknowledge that in Milwaukee, we live and work on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homelands along the southwest shores of Michigami, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnick rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. So thanks, fam, for sharing in our show. I am Janelle. I'm here to play some stuff about birds, part 2. I'm a second-year PhD, and I am joined by various lovely people who I can't see because Streamlabs is covering Discord, so please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Eric. I'm David, first-year PhD student here at UW Milwaukee.
And I am Ren, and I have an apple in my mouth.
That's very good. Alright, so we're here to play... Is that everybody that's here? Did I cut anybody off?
That is everyone.
Oh, sweet. Okay, that was like my greatest fear. We're here to play day 2 of Falcon Age. We started over on coffee break. And when we started, we had an itty-bitty little falcon boy. And now we have this big old falcon. And she's here to wreck, as we saw. But as a quick sort of recap for folks that weren't here on coffee break, this is a game all about birds and fighting colonialism. As you can see, we are in what was probably once a very nice place, but is now barren and very excavated, and a lot of bad things have happened. It's colonialism in action, and here's sort of the surviving, or what surviving might look like outside of where we started, which was this weird, isolated prison sort of thing, work labor prison, where it was just me and a robot banished to re-educate me until I was willing to do things. And what that was just mining ore for them kind of forever. And then this little falcon came along, and it turns out this little falcon can destroy robots and do all kinds of other crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was kind of... I don't know if it was in the narrative itself, but it kind of seemed like you were maybe arrested for doing something bad or for like rebelling or something, and then you were thrown in for like quote-unquote rehabilitation, is what it seemed like to me.
Yeah, I think that is what it was. It didn't give us any indication of what the actual quote-unquote crime was, but there is the kind of implication that it wasn't really a crime, it was kind of nothing. Or it was certainly not worth the punishment that was doled out. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so I think this is the part that we're at is really interesting because the two, right, I think we're still kind of in the tutorial stage, right? Mm-hmm. And that's also echoed in like you not being able to name your falcon yet. And so right. I was thinking like that's an interesting relationship there. It's like a between like the narrative element and then like the gameplay element. Because like I guess the only thing similar I could think of is like you get to nickname your starter Pokemon after you do your first battle. But yeah. That's the only other like relatively kind of somewhat similar thing I can think of to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it seems that there's like this process to earning the right to name your falcon, and you're kind of part of this long-standing cultural tradition of being falcon hunters who have like a falcon companion and they're best friends and they do all kinds of stuff. It seems like at least right now what that's going to be like is there's this kind of underlying narrative of reclaiming, like the main character Ada, or Sarangirai, but she prefers Ada, just seems to... Oh yeah, hi Danger Chunk, sorry, I got very distracted by chat, hi. Ada seems to be trying to certainly like name her falcon and get to that point in her journey, but she's also kind of fighting this either colonial effort, like trying to undo something or to get back what she feels was lost, and that's kind of like where this conversation I think is going. But there's a whole lot sort of baked into this naming process. But I agree, David, that I still think that we're in the kind of tutorial. I think that so for those of us that weren't here on Monday, the first hour of this game is just kind of breaking out of the prison.
Both of you.
And meeting the Falcon and becoming friends with them, taking care of them. And then you go into this kind of time skip where now we wake up where we started this morning. And your Falcon is much bigger. It's been a few months, and now you're ready to go do this other task. So it seems like now the game's going to open up quite a bit more, and we're going to be doing more in the actual world.
Yeah.
Oh, real quick thing for VR fans. This is also available in VR, and honestly, having played a little bit of it, I feel like this will be very fun in VR if it doesn't make you nauseated.
Yeah,
Wait,
it does seem like a very good VR game.
You got a hat that's called a baby bird hat?
What?
Can you give that bird a little hat?
Is this?
That can turn it back into a baby bird.
What?
That's so cute.
Oh, that's adorable. Yay, little cute Falcon's back. Oh, that's cute. Yeah, okay, we're gonna keep the little BB Falcon because she's adorable. Alright, go fly somewhere. You're doing great. So this is the sort of space that is left after what seems to be a very long time of colonial extraction.
Yeah, it doesn't appear to be that the desert is just like a natural environment without human, you know. Like, it's not just that way. It's because of natural processes.
Right. Human or apparently robot colonizers.
Yeah, hard to know if they're just disembodied robots or if they are, like, they're humans behind the scenes orchestrating the robots.
Yeah. Okay. So I know from our play last time that I will be able to blow this up if I get one of those little spider bots. Okay.
Robot turtles would be good, but I don't know. So many good possibilities for robots.
Oh.
It's really good to see, like, VR games come to life that are more complex than they were 5 years ago. Excuse me. I know this is, like, because this really is kind of, like, on the first wave of, like, you know, the really detailed VR games. I think, like, Half-Life Alyx, it was, like, a turning point. The other one that comes to mind is Stress Level Zero's Boneworks or Duck Season. Most of those were really big turning points.
The question is what do you mean by like a leap forward, I suppose, or you know what I mean?
A leap into narrative, not just into like a playtest.
Tech demo, not just like it's like Beat Saber is kind of a tech demo game, and in a sense, right? Because like it's fun, it's Guitar Hero, with it's better than Guitar Hero in some ways, but it's still got the trappings of being like, wow, look at what cool, neat things we can do in this tech, as opposed to like, okay, here's like our thing. I'm kind of curious because like Half-Life Alyx, you could not play it except in VR. Like you can't, you know what I mean? And so this game, I'm kind of curious about. Like it seems like it works. Like did this come first and then they added the VR mode second? Mm-hmm. Like
yeah, that is what happened.
I'm almost a little suspicious of how well that would control and play then, just because you really can't just take a traditional game and just slide it into VR, at least in my experience. Like I tried it with Half-Life 1, and it was really awkward.
I wonder, another game that did this was Super Hot, right? Like they had...
Super Hot works really well, but they changed the way the game plays. And maybe they did that here. In Super Hot, you don't move. You don't move left or right or up. We don't walk at all. You stand in one spot and like dodge bullets and shoot guns and throw stuff. But as opposed to a normal Super Hot where you're running around constantly.
Let's go.
Yeah, no kidding.
I like how even that tiny little bird can like somehow.
I know. This
Are you
bird
are
is
you
like scary.
taking down the goat?
I'm not necessarily trying to. I'm just trying to see what I need to do for my objective, which is currently to hunt some lizards. Oh dear. Look, I don't want to fight you. Not necessarily.
Danger Chunk offers a really interesting question.
Yeah, I was just gonna say though, it is a multi-tool and not just a whip.
Yes.
Just a
It is a. Yes, it is. So this actually was an upgrade. Okay, listen. This was an upgrade from a baton that was stolen from the robot colonizer, and the character's auntie rigged it into a baton and a whip.
You know, but that does still kind of hit the same.
So it's a
beats.
reappropriating the tool, right?
Right.
The whip case.
Yeah, and the baton still has like that context of being a weapon for policing, you know, which feeds into the same kinds of violence in some respects. Oh, well, what is that a ham?
That was just a big chunk of goat meat.
Oh,
So your falcon just went off and killed some goat
Oh,
while you
my
were.
falcon needs help.
Yeah, maybe it should be the big falcon for this part.
I don't know that it makes a difference.
It might. I don't know if it does either.
Who's doing that?
Is this the same path you traveled? Like, are you going back down the same path? as you
No,
did last
I was
time?
going
Okay.
somewhere else.
oh.
Okay.
Time to go.
Oh.
I think I should be able to. Oh, that's horrifying.
I think we're a
Oh.
few seconds behind. Oh.
Okay, buddy. Wait, no, come back. That's not what I mean
That's
either.
rough.
I wish that the controls were a bit easier. I think that's really just me. There we go. Okay. So, yes, Danger Chunk, I hear that. I didn't know that either. I am playing this for the first time.
We do have a mature warning when you first sign into the stream.
Okay, wait, but come back so I can give you food.
That image reminded me. I watched Nausicaa of the Wind Valley, or the Valley of the Wind, last night. I don't know. Have you guys seen that movie?
Yeah, I haven't seen it for a while, but it's a great one.
That reminded me
like
of the Ohm child that they, that is like. I guess this is really big spoilers. I don't know. I don't know if I should spoil the movie. It's a good movie. I watched it. You know, it definitely has the trappings of like, oh man, this was an animated Japanese movie in the 80s. So like some of the animation isn't as good as it could be, but the story is fantastic. But there's a moment in that game that was reminding me a lot of The Bird just now, or the game, that movie. That reminded me of The Bird.
Gotcha. Well, we were talking about this on Monday because, I mean, the kind of treatment of the little bird is just horrifying sometimes. And sorry.
You're not gonna cook the falcon, are you?
No, I'm going to make the falcon a snack. Oh, real quick, Danger Chunk asked, how does the bird work with you in this game? Honestly, the bird does all the work. I feel like me as the player doesn't really do much aside from, there you go, buddy.
You're the bird's brain.
Not even really. I'm the bird's suggestion. I'm like suggesting that you please go over here and do things, but in terms of like the actual playing of the game, it doesn't feel like the human character does much of anything, which is interesting. It makes a lot of sense. There we go. Wait, how do I? Oh, oops.
So it seems kind of more like, at least from what I could tell from you, like interacting with some of those pillars, that it's like you're maybe doing some work with the baton to like depower some things, right? Or like open things,
Yes.
right? But you're not engaging in combat really.
Yeah, I'm not really engaging in combat. Like, I suppose, like we just saw a second ago when I kind of got into trouble because I sort of underestimated the environment a bit. I can assist my bird in combat, right? Like, the little birdie got into trouble, so I went in to try and help, and I like kind of used the baton to beat up the robots. But it doesn't seem to be nearly as effective as like one swoop from this falcon will destroy a robot. You know what I mean? So it makes a human feel very ineffectual in that way.
Yeah, and I wonder, is the larger bird, like, do the large and the small bird, are they like both the same combat wise? Like, is it just a cosmetic difference between the two, or I wonder if there's like a
That's a good question.
tactical difference between the two. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it's probably just a cosmetic thing, but who knows?
It seems
It just doesn't seem like they would like put you in a position where they would clearly explain the difference between those two things if it was a necessary gameplay mechanic.
right. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I imagine that they would give some kind of indication because when you open that up in the menu here, it doesn't give any indication of an aesthetic difference, and the kind of bar in the corner doesn't change. Oh, that's nice. So Danger Chunk asks, is it really not the human doing these things when the bird is realistically just a bundle of human-made algorithms responding to threats placed in the game by human designers? Yes, absolutely. So, I should clarify. When I'm saying that the bird does most of the work, I'm talking within the game itself as opposed to kind of game as object. I'm really talking about within the story and within the way that I am as a player engaging with the environment and my own abilities like a person in this game. I'm not doing a whole lot myself. Rather, I'm directing the bird, which granted is provided to me in the specific paths and options by the game designers, right? Because everything in the environment is predetermined. So there is that, but as much as I can operate within those confines, the bird has much more flexibility than I do.
Yeah, your baton seems only to be useful in providing CC. And that's good, because it seems like the Falcon does a lot of damage, but if it gets targeted, then, you know, it goes down relatively quickly. So you really do have to, like, be 50-50 on that, you know? So you've got, if the bird is targeting something, you have to be whipping it as well to stop the thing from
Right.
damaging the bird too much.
Exactly.
Or at least that was my sense of it. Maybe the game doesn't play like that and I'm misreading. It's hard to know when some of these things are down to, like, how does the game make you feel?
Right. Well, certainly
Right,
part of what it makes
how
me
does-
feel is responsible to make sure that the bird is safe.
Nice. So I guess damage doesn't reset. So that's good to know.
Yeah, I wonder if I don't. This has just got me thinking about games in general. Actually, let's do Danger Chunk's question because my question is not fully formed. Who Danger Chunk's asking, to your point about the lack of control that you have over your player character, who's really keeping you safe in this game?
Well, let's see.
I feel like part of it kind of comes from your aunt.
Yeah,
like-
that's exactly right.
Because like I'm thinking how she kind of performs a very similar role to, say, like a Gandalf kind of character, right? Where you have the authority figure. She's a little more like brusque, you know, rather than like matronly.
Yeah.
But but she still is narratively performing the same role, just in like her own, in the style of her own character, where like she has the ability to train you, to teach you, to help you become better, give you better tools to help you navigate the environment. And so it's like you're relying on her knowledge, but it's also very deliberately narrativized as a familial sociological knowledge that's being like passed down generationally, right, in ways that maybe aren't as highlighted in that way in other texts, right? Like the it's like a generational thing.
wonder how long you can hold that. 'Cause I'm wondering if you can actually get that thing back to the rock
That's
before
exactly
it blows
what I'm
up.
trying to do.
Yeah.
What's the rock over here? Is it still past?
It's way back that way.
Yeah.
Towards the gate, I think.
Yeah. It seems like he's just gonna hold on to it.
That's good.
She's good.
Companions in games are just kind of fascinating on their own, right? Like, I mean, I think about how much of a stink that the Bioshock Infinite devs made about Elizabeth and her AI and how she was going to be able to make more decisions for herself, you know? But I mean, like, functionally, what does she really exist for in that game other than being a companion that Booker just gets to boss around?
Right.
Like, yeah, I mean, her
Well,
character
she also
is
killed
more
him.
depthful than that. Yes, her
There
character
is
is more
that.
depthful than that.
Oh,
But when
right.
we're engaging in just like thinking about the mechanics of the game and the changes that are made to the mechanics of the game when an AI companion has, you know, is not making discrete choices on their own, but can be directed to make choices. You know, I think those are two different things.
Yeah, I can't remember the game. It came out in like 2014 or 2015, and it was like where you're like a small little boy and there's this big cat thing. It's like a cat, bird, dog thing. I'm gonna figure it
The
out.
Guardian.
Oh
Yeah. And that's a game where like it's your relationship with the animal is not like where the human has control of. You know, it's not quite like it feels like the power dynamic is constantly shifting between the two characters.
Mhm.
Mostly, I shouldn't say constantly shifting, right? Mostly like you play as a young boy who like is trying to get this animal companion to do things that they don't want to do, which I think presents its own complex relationship.
I remember a lot of the early reviews of that game were like, wow, it's beautiful, the story is great, but I'm so frustrated by the gameplay. You know, I just can't get him to go where I need him to go, and it's like, I understand that complaint, but, you know, there is something, if you expect that every time that you get a companion in a video game, they're going to do exactly as you tell them to do, and there's a whole world of stories that you can't tell.
Sure.
And, you know, whether or not people want to engage with those stories, I suppose, is a different matter. But to me, that's just a very, like, I understand the criticism, like, where it comes from, and why it would be frustrating if you think that the thing that you're going into a game for is freedom of movement, agency, that sort of stuff.
Well, one thing that's interesting in this conversation to me is that in some ways the player character is the player's companion. And if you think about another, like a companion like the Guardian in The Last Guardian, that's kind of like, then that becomes the player character's player character, almost in a sense, right? There's a level of further abstraction. Because like the character that Janelle is playing as right now, that isn't Janelle. Right, she is doing the exact same thing she does with the Falcon to this character. Right, when you press left, or A, I guess, you know, which would be left on the WASD. Right, like the character responds, but not always as fast as you want. Right, not always in the exact. Right, there's like still a layer of abstraction there. So I think that it's kind of interesting, I guess, to think of it that way. There's a really good game that came out recently that had an amazing companion system, but I am like completely blanking on it right now. Pulling up the Xbox app to try to find it. Like, did I play it on the Xbox? I don't think I did. Like, I think about a game like a lot of games have this kind of co-presence with an AI. Now I'm just looking through my games library on Xbox. So I think about Madden, right? Madden's like a fantastic example of this, right? Because like there are 22 players, quote unquote, on the field doing things. Yet the player, like let's say you're playing 1v1 even, there's still only two. You're only taking control of two at a time, and then you kind of expect all the other ones to autopilot until you take control of them directly. I don't know. I think the idea of the companion could be very much expanded in games discourse. As to trying to define it, because like I agree with you guys. I think just like sometimes we reduce companion to I have this falcon, or I have to do I have Ashley in Resident Evil 4 and I gotta get her out of here, and oh, she got captured again or something. Escort mission.
And
Totally.
Like something like that, of course, like at its most basic comes down to Portal's companion cube, right? The game object as the companion. And I think that works works well, and when it came out, it worked well as its own piece of commentary. And I think in a lot of ways, you look at other companions in maybe Portal 2 and their narrative function as opposed to the companion cube, and there's a difference in affect. Even if the companion cube is a tool, it's like the fact that you have to destroy it gives you this fondness for it that you wouldn't otherwise have. Even though it is literally commenting on the idea that this person who you would normally have as a companion in your story is just somebody who you're using,
Right.
So here's a question: if it has no artificial intelligence, is it considered a companion, or is that like I'm trying to define what a companion is? Is that the prerequisite? That's my first instinct guess.
I would agree. I think there's an exception to be made when the game delineates that one is to think as something as a companion, and that's where the companion cube comes to mind, right? Because it's not that it has AI; it's just that it exists as an object that has been designated in the game world linguistically as a companion, and therefore the player is primed to think of it as such.
Yeah, I mean, and something that's interesting about the companion cube versus other companions is that it still does perform multiple actions to help you solve a puzzle, but it doesn't have that AI component where it can do those things by itself.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is then in this logic, the whip that Janelle is using, or the multi-tool, is also a companion, right? Because it helps accomplish tasks, right? Or a block in Minecraft is a companion because it helps you build your house, right? And so it can't just be
any game object.
Ends oriented, right? If it's just, it has to be means oriented to some degree. And I think AI makes sense. It's by AI, I really just mean does the player perceive that it acts upon its own volition in some manner?
So something as simple as characters in XCOM that have a percentage chance to hit when they fire a gun can be perceived as companions in that logic, because the random number generator makes it appear as though they have some agency to misfire.
Sure. I'm always for expanding definitions rather than reducing, but I think you have to start somewhere, right? Otherwise, you end up with everything is a companion. I do like the idea that the Falcon is the player character's player character.
Player character Rashomon.
Oh, he got shot.
L1, call it back.
I got him.
Is that like a turret? What's going on over there? Is there another flying guy?
No, it's that thing over there.
Oh.
All my friends hate machines. Sorry, friend, but you just typed that on a machine.
I think
what's with these homies dissing my machines?
The idea of where a analysis looking at companions, they're one of the games I think that would be most fruitful if we ever want to play this on lunch. That'd be awesome. I don't know if anybody has Nier Automata on PC.
I do.
But there's a conversation I think in that game to be had about the enemies as their own companions.
What's interesting to me too is also how is the companion that you can, because in Nier Automata, right, you can say I want to be offense oriented. I want him to focus on healing. I want to you can say this is what I want this other character to focus on. Whereas in something like this, right, the Falcon is not something that you can go into a menu and kind of adjust the AI to the style of gameplay you like. And so I wonder how that is also different in game spaces, right? Or if maybe it's a more of a genre kind of thing, like that's another another facet to this that I think could be really fruitful.
Well, it's always a confluence of factors, right? Like the immediate thing I think of is something like Kingdom Hearts, right? I have to play around Donald. I hate him so much. I have to play around that asshole. But I can change what abilities he has access to, right? I can say, oh, okay, I don't want you to use Duck Flare. Why I would do that, I don't know. But I can't, like, say to him, oh, I want you to be more aggressive, I want you to be more passive, whatever else. It's just, do you have access to these AP skills? And you go off into your own thing, and I hope to God that you're going to save me if I need it. There's a trust there that Donald has broken on every occasion that he's had the option to break it. But, that's not strictly speaking one or the other, right? There are aspects that I have to change my play around the companion, and there are aspects that, or I can ignore him and barrel through everything as I usually do. And there are aspects where I can choose to control that companion. And another character that outside of Donald that I think comes to mind as far as Kingdom Hearts goes is Jack Skellington. He's like the best companion in Kingdom Hearts 1 because he steps over everybody. And because I can rely on him to do magic damage, when I am playing in Halloween Town, I do not have to worry about magic at all, Like I can just let it go. And that changes the way I play. That's me playing around a companion positively. Even though I can't necessarily control him per se.
Oh,
This isn't really just what we were just talking about, but it's really interesting that this character here, who's representing some kind of resistance to this Outer Ring Company colonial figure, is giving me all of this information having just met me, and is giving it orally. And there's something in that I think is really important, just the kind of privileging of the oral description as opposed to something like giving a document or notes or something. Just this kind of verbal conversation in this context feels especially important. What is happening in the chat right now?
we're talking about Nier.
Okay.
Yeah. That does
It's
happen.
also they're simulating an orgy. It's not actually an orgy.
I see.
but it does raise the interesting question of, right, what's the difference between learned behavior and like emergence and that kind of stuff, right? But even within the realm of, say, like game, right, there's a difference between how games for something like, with Metal Gear Solid, right, it's still within the program of Metal Gear Solid that you can only do certain actions. And so, like, if you as a player rely on certain actions, right, the game is programmed to adjust the enemy based off of that reliance on that action. So it's still within, the framework of what the developers of the game have done. So I don't know if it's really like evolving or learning from you, but it's just like adjusting the algorithm based off of what you've done, which I guess you could say is also how other algorithms work, but I don't know.
Well, sure. Reproducing, learning, these are, linguistic metaphors that apply a certain humanity to something that doesn't necessarily happen.
I mean, it does depend on how we define those terms. I think sometimes it can be like, ouch.
Oh, jeez. It's deadly.
Ouch.
I think sometimes it can be tricky because, like, it's like the word learn. Like, I think this is a pretty fruitful and interesting conversation to have. So I'm sorry if I'm about to be derailing in any way. But like the word learn, right? It means for like my cat can learn, right? And my, a dog can learn and a person can learn. And so the question becomes, okay, can a computer learn? Right? If an algorithm is changing its behaviors based on external stimulus, or stimulus. What's stimulus mean? Stimulus.
COVID relief, yeah.
Yeah. But an external stimulate. Stimulation. Oh my gosh. Okay, that word's catching me up right now. Anyways, so if it is doing that, it is learning in the same way that a dog learns in some facet. But I think you did catch on to something which is really important. All right. I think about particularly the story of like God breathing life into Adam, right? And like making man in God's image. And then like human beings, we make AI in our own image in terms of, so when we say an AI learns, it does have some aspect of humanity within it that isn't present when we say our cat learns, right? Because we didn't design the cat to be like us, but we did design the AI to be like us or to think like us, because the AI can only think like us because we made it. Just like how we are made in God's image or whatever, if you're going by the whole thing. Mm-hmm. We're always trying to play God as stupid humans.
So like you're saying, right, like even if we are thinking like let's design this like a computer, it's still only being able to be constructed within the realm of what humans can conceive of.
You know, I think that a good way to think about it is that, you know, obviously machine logic and human logic are different. Like they have to be to some degree different. But the thing that we strive for as we attempt to create user level interfaces for machines is something that feels more, quote, intuitive to the human, right? And that expressly delineates a desire to make something more human in a certain sense, right? Or at least more understandable within that frame of reference. So, you know, even though there's... How do I put this? Right. Even though assembly language is still eldritch witchcraft and, you know, compilation isn't exactly something that makes perfect sense to people on an intuitive or instinctual level, we're still trying to design the system on top of all these ideas that, you know, when you sit down and you interface with it, it just makes sense. It becomes, quote, natural, right? An extension of the body.
Can I share, since we're talking about the natural now, I want to share one of my favorite quotes from the reading we're doing for Anthro 744 this week. Where is it? I need to find it. So he says, which shows you that things we find natural are historical. Moreover, they horrify everyone in the world but us.
That's amazing.
Which I like.
Yeah, the conversation about failure and learning, I think, is interesting too. I mean, that's just right. That's like how you teach a cat, at least, right? It's through failure. It's like it jumps up on the counter and you're like, no, and then you spray it or something, and it's like, it failed to not go on the counter, and thus got punished. That might not have been a very good analogy. But let me be me.
I think that's a good example, right? Because we could say like, oh, the cat isn't doing what we want it to do, so that is a failure on the cat's end. But mechanically, right, it was a successful teaching, right? If the cat stays off the counter, because the action we took to get it off the counter, which was spraying the bottle, is now a success on our end. Right. And then if the cat goes back up on the counter again, then that could be considered like a failure on our end to teach the cat, right? Even though we performed the same action.
Is that a little bit, and forgive the phrasing because I don't have a better way to phrase it right this second. That's a little bit blaming the victim, right? Or like blaming the teacher for like the student not learning something. I guess.
But yeah, I think what's interesting about that though, right, is the failure to like what are we determining as the failure is going to determine how we think of the action is what I'm not saying like one way is right to think of or another, but just how we approach what failure is conceived of, you know, is gonna determine how we analyze the situation.
And while we're talking about cats, I mean, the cat, relative to the cat, the failure is not present, you know? Exactly. Like, you don't want the cat onto the counter, but the cat just wants to get on the fucking counter. Like, it jumped up, it made it, that's a success. the only thing that happened is that it had no frame of mind to imagine that you would squirt it with water and that it would not enjoy that thing, you know?
Right.
Darn it.
And so I think you know, there's a question to be had whether I think machines and sentient animals operate by the same kind of, you know, concepts of failure, right? Like, is it a failure that if I searched Michelle Obama in, you know, 2016, the first result was a gorilla? I would say so. I think that's a horrible failure.
Yeah.
But I'm also not talking about a sentient being that has its own whims, you know? I'm talking about a programmed interface that people designed and didn't either foresaw that emergence and said this is acceptable, or didn't foresee that emergence, and therefore, you know, the result was racism.
Speaking of cats, my cat is dreaming. She's freaking out. She's like sleeping. She's jumping around and fidgeting and stuff. It's pretty cute.
Alright, I think we did it. This seems to be the last part of this area here.
I mean, I think I might take a slightly less cat positive approach.
Oh no.
Do we like? I don't know.
I give cats.
I
everything
hesitate
they
to say something like cats are lesser beings.
Yeah, my cat wouldn't like it if you said that.
Well, cats can understand us, so no. Just kidding.
Oh yeah, maybe there's like, you know, we can construct a situation where there's like a bomb on the counter. If the cat jumps on the counter, it'll die, right? And so your actions.
Or just that's my plate. I don't want you to
eat my food. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with
And I mean,
over here.
cats do that with other cats, right? Like cats hiss at each other, pee on things to claim their territory too. So and I'm not saying like humans are doing it the exact same way, but like this idea that humans are the only people that lay claim to spaces is also just like not, I think, not beneficial to understanding the situation either, because cats also, like, some cats, right, if I saw a study that like if cats, maybe it was just a meme actually, not a study, but like if cats like to go up on top of cabinets and stuff, when they look down on things, it's because they think they have like, they're surveying the space because they think they own the space, right? And so like, even though we as humans might conceptualize that we own the cat in their own brain, they might think they own us.
Oh, my cat definitely thinks that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And to the question
But
of...
what is marriage but that?
Oh. Jesus Christ.
So, real quick, I just want to point out, so we cleared out this refinery, right? We cleared out all the robots, we cleaned it up. By turning it off, that's literally the only thing we did. The entire environment looks completely different. Like, if you guys remember a little bit ago, it was all smoky and red and, like, literal fire shit was, like, spewing out of here, like, just horrifying. It's no longer that. And now, actually, my guy over here is pretty sure he can turn this place into a farm.
Hell yeah.
So there seems to be some kind of, sorry, real quick, there seems to be some kind of project of kind of rehabilitating the land in that way.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's interesting that they don't have anybody, there are no humans associated with the operation of these spaces, you know? Which suggests that the colonizers are utterly convinced there's no way an uprising, you know, that could destroy the robots could occur.
Right.
It suggests they're making certain assumptions about the ability of those they're colonizing.
Well, I do think it's interesting though, because are robots just taking the space of like governors?
Yeah.
Oh, sure,
You know.
yeah, I mean, functionally, absolutely.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like I wonder then if that relationship, that attitude, you know, between the mother country and the colony, you know, with big quotes around both of those, you know, phrases, I wonder if the robots are serving the same function, right? When we are trying to get rid of the tools and the rule of the people who have colonized the space, the robots attack us and try to kill us. And like, is that functionally all that different from humans who serve the same function? Obviously, yes, in some ways, right? But in the game, right, I could, if you just replace the robot with humans, I think it's functionally the same in the game.
Yeah, that's true.
There's no reason. This game has given us no reason to believe that the robots aren't like relatively sentient. You know?
It seems like it, right? Because we had that robot that seemed to really not handle isolation very well. Exactly.
It's a very odd quality to give a machine, you know, if it's just a machine. Which I think deepens the like. I depreciate, or I should say, I think depreciate. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Like, despite us going for the sci-fi setting and all of that, there doesn't seem to be some like inhuman element to like, so that's not exactly what I mean. What I mean to say is the inhumanity of colonization is not this cannot be done by humans. It's that it is a devious, horrible thing. In that, you know, the robots show these kinds of human traits and therefore, you know, are not so distinct from human beings doing this.
Yeah, the problem is that it is human.
Yeah.
Right.
That's always the problem.
I love, like, this. We got a conversation about conspiracy theories and that get really, really, really intense and cause a lot of disruption, like Holocaust denial, in a seminar that I took in undergrad. And I just recall, like, most of the class being like, "Oh, it's inhuman, you know," and that's useful insofar as it's a critique. But when I feel like when we're approached by those things, sometimes there's a gut reaction to say it's inhuman as a way of rejecting it from our concept of self, as opposed to saying it's inhuman because it's, you know, evil and wrong and metaphoric.
Well, there's also this really, I don't know. I know that me always distracting. There's also this weird difference between inhumane and inhuman, right? Inhumane is like, it's not what we aspire to be, right? Like, it's inhumane to use chemical weapons, right? Because, like, as humans, we should aspire to do better than to do that, right? Which, I mean, is a good idea. But inhuman, right? It's like a robot or something, right? It's like not what we aspire to be, but it's like the negative of that, right? It's like what we aspire not to be, or something like that.
I wonder, and that kind of reminds me of like the language of like politicians being like, this isn't who we are, or this isn't what America is, right? And part of that deferral of like separating out the inhumaneness of others as an inhumanity, right? That lets you, in some ways, like claim authority, right, of what proper behavior is. And it lets you position yourself as, you know, an upstanding person. Sometimes for very, very beneficial reasons, right? Thinking particularly like with people who are being oppressed, right? In those communities, that is a very appropriate response to that. But obviously can also be used very nefariously as well.
Train her, but
I'm thinking like discussions of colonization as an example, Holocaust denial as an example. There's a tendency to, like I said, separate yourself from the construct.
Yeah.
And like not want to believe, like have a vested interest, not that your society wouldn't do that, but that you wouldn't do that, and then project that out to society, you know?
Now get out of here, girl.
And I think that hampers a lot of discussion around these why these atrocities occur. You know, why do people get swept up in capitalism, you know? Well, you know, there must be something human about that. even if it's something we don't want to. The clothing gives them buffs too.
It
It's
does.
so cute. I love it.
I mean,
I'm sorry.
I have a pretty particular answer to the last thing that you just said. The question was why. I mean, to some degree, I mean, to be fair, Eric is the least Marxist person you'll meet who's getting a PhD. But I think that, like, I mean, if I look at capitalism, right, capitalism is in some ways a middle step between feudalism or monarchism. I don't want monarchism, but you know what I mean. Like, you know what I mean. I'm not saying any words, but you know what I mean. But it's like it's kind of a stepping stone between feudalism and maybe something else in some ways, right? Because capitalism diversifies who has resources to some degree, where it's not just the king, right, who has all of the resources and everyone else is kind of working with them. And so capitalism, of course, falls into a lot of the same pitfalls as feudalism does ultimately. But for those within the system, right, it is a compromise, right? So like people are less likely, like, you know, people kill kings. You know, we are a little less likely to kill capitalists. And so for the capitalists, that's a gain. But if I was just answering the why do people get swept up in that question.
Right, and like obviously, even outside of that explanation, there are tons of things that you could keep positing, things that are destructive that people engage with all day. Also, I love that man's stance.
I know, he's great.
It's absolutely lovely. But you know, I keep positing things all day, and what you get is that just this long list of things that people are asking questions about in sociology or whatever else for the last 3-4 decades or 3,000 decades or whatever, right? So you know, how much traction does that get? But I do think that there's something to be said about the tendency, especially in our culture right now, to distance oneself from atrocity by saying, you know, I wouldn't do that, my culture wouldn't do that. Therefore,
yeah.
it's not a happened.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Like, I mean, I think the gun owners in America have a really potent sense of that Schadenfreude. How do you pronounce that word? I've never said it out loud. This is like my first time saying it.
Schadenfreude?
Schadenfreude, yeah, sure. All right, have a great day, Danger Chunk.
Bye, friends.
I did want to talk about that clothing thing for a moment after the what were we talking about?
Do you want to get the clothing right now?
We're talking about atrocities. Oh yeah, and people wanting to. Yeah, I think a large part of that is I think that's the gut reaction to the atrocity being so bad, it's nearly unbelievable. It's like because you just don't want to believe that human beings can be that terrible, right?
Yeah.
But
sorry.
With the clothing, I have a question. How do we know that the falcon doesn't prefer the helmet? And the reason why I say that is because in like Mongolia, in countries where falconeering is like a thing, they put helmets on the falcons. And here's the thing: that's not a fashion statement, right? Like they do that because it's the falcon is evidently more effective at whatever it's doing, right? And they take it off right when the falcon comes back. So presumably, I don't know if the falcon likes it necessarily, but if the falcon is doing its job better and the falcon wants to do its job, then who are we to say that it's negatively impacting them? I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, right? Because that's sort of what I was thinking. Like the scarf, you know, I don't really know about that. Maybe it gets chilly up there, and the scarf is helpful. But in these particular cases, I see these more as like utility, right? And so it's a logical buff as opposed to just trying to sort of gamify something. It's a logical buff, right? They're wearing a helmet, they're gonna have increased defense, and that's because to be fair, they're like bombarding giant rocks. So there's that. So I think that makes sense, but it has value in both ways then, right? It's both the aesthetic value of it, but it's also, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to bomb this thing. So it's the aesthetic value, but it also has a kind of logical defense value. I mean, like, I'm glad my Falcon had a helmet to go do that they just did.
So take this with a grain of salt, because not like I just pulled this from Quora. But evidently one of the reasons why you put blinders on falcons is because they get really excited by sudden changes in movement, and they have trouble calming down. But if they can't see, they think that they are safe, and thus they calm down.
Interesting.
It's kind of the opposite.
Thank you, Quora. Again, that was Quora.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's kind of the opposite energy of putting blinders on a horse. But that's another case where like you do a similar thing. You're accomplishing utility with relative to the animal's existence. I mean, I don't think. I think it would be a rather radical statement to say that a human cannot have a cooperative relationship with an animal that isn't like in some way colonial. You know. Like, I think that's probably, I would, my gut would be to say that is untrue. And so I think, like, if we're building off of that framework, then, like, if there are use cases and relationships we have with animals that are not necessarily colonial or problematic, then, like, why not augment those relationships?
Right.
If that's to the benefit of the parties present, you know?
Yeah, it is tricky. I think it's tricky. It really like with animals, it really depends on how you define the human being's like relationship to the animal, like, and what like you like for instance, this is one example, but like it's like a cow. I'll take a milking cow, not like a beef cow. All right, how much of the cow has been domesticated to like over many thousands of years just want to, right? Like this is its preferred habitat now. We made it its preferred habitat. I'm not saying it's naturally, quote unquote, but if you like certain animals, you just throw them into the wild, right? That's not necessarily good for them, right?
Sure.
And so that's just something that I don't know. Just a thought. But yeah, it really depends on just what your personal view of human relationship with animals should be.
Right.
I love that you can just garden more stuff now. It's so cool.
Yeah, like kind of forever it seems, as they grow pretty instantly, which is pretty cool. So we are basically at the top of the hour. There's clearly a lot more to be done here, so I'll certainly be playing this, and I encourage anybody who's interested in it, pick it up, try it for VR if you got that. I'd be super interested to hear how this plays out in VR, and if it's fun, if it's sort of works. VR makes me super sick, so that's not my game. But this game itself is super fun and does very important work, I think, in both furthering the kind of work of games that are actively trying to be decolonial. There's a clear effort for that here, and I think it's, as from what I've seen anyway, part of what it makes it so successful is that it's very apparent. It's very obvious that is its intention, which is kind of the downfall of some games that don't do that. So overall, I'm really happy I picked this up for 2 hours, and thank you to everybody for hanging out. Does anybody want to share any final thoughts before we sign off?
I'm good, but I had a great conversation today. Sorry for my random ramblings.
No, random ramblings are always the best.
Oh, I wanted to instead of apologize, I wanted to thank you, Janelle, for playing.
You're
because
very welcome.
we were going off on crazy tangents, and you were rolling with it while, sending your Falcon out.
I'm always here for it, man.
I don't know if you're planning on writing a blog post about this or not, but like there just seems to be so much life in this game as far as stuff to like talk about and engage with, and it's genuinely like a very impressive product.
It really is. I was thinking about it. I got a blog post coming up. But if there is something that I'm going to talk about, probably what I'm most interested in right now is this cooking thing. This seems really robust and a lot more than I thought it was going to be. And it's interesting that the food is notated pretty specifically for your Falcon. It's not actually for you. I don't know what I eat. But everything here seems to really be about taking care of this Falcon and creating a relationship between you as the player and this Falcon that's meant to be very, very organic, very alive. So I think that they were really successful in doing that, which is what makes it so engaging and fun.
Can I leave with a discussion question or
Oh my
a
God,
thought
yes.
for the audience?
Absolutely.
So one thing that's really weird about this game to me is that on one hand we have the very clear roots of colonialism, as we've described quite profoundly, in relation to like these robot overlords, and like there's like obvious like that's there. But on the other hand, I like the natural resource collection scheme is incredibly idyllic, right? Like you just plant something, you come back 5 minutes later and you've got plants, right? It seems like there's like infinite food for your falcon here, right? And so I think that there's a question to be had of the juxtaposition between a form of structuring like resources, which would be colonialism, that is fundamentally based on scarcity. I guess I shouldn't say that definitively. Maybe that's too charitably human of me to say that that scarcity of resources causes these problems. But and then you've got this world where scarcity of resources doesn't seem to exist. And I think that is a pitfall of so many games like this. I'm not like any game with a crafting system tends to have this problem. I'm not necessarily complaining about Falcon Age here. And I think that's something worth considering, is like, how do you dismantle like colonialist structures if you're not willing to also engage with resource scarcity?
Yep, that's absolutely. We were talking about that a little bit on Monday when we first noticed it. At the very, very beginning of the game, you're asked to mine ore for these colonial robots, and you don't have a whole lot of room to move around. But when you circle the kind of open area once, by the time that you've done that, all the ore that you mined has already regenerated, and you can do it all over again, which creates an interesting time loop of like labor, certainly, where you're just kind of mining forever if you don't notice that. But it also really cements that lack of resource scarcity. Whatever resources are made available here, if it's, potatoes, turnips, mine, or ore, whatever, there is an infinite amount of it, and it will regenerate kind of at your need. In that way, it still feels very much like an anthrome, which is a term from Alinda Chang, which is just sort of referring to the idea that all of these spaces are still human-centered in a way that the actual environment is not. So it's and still sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say, and like one of the most profound and important legacies of colonialism is the way that it takes natural resources from a place and then leaves nothing for the people, right? So it's like, you could have like a place like India or Pakistan, right, be quote unquote decolonialized when the British like give them their country, right? Which is like already a weird way of phrasing it, right? Or a very problematic way of phrasing it. But it's like the legacy persists, right? That's what we call post-colonial. It's not just it's not just not colonial anymore, right? It's post-colonial. And part of the reason is because a resource-rich place no longer is as rich in resources as it once was. And if you don't grasp with that in this kind of context, that creates, I think, a problematic portrayal of colonialism and post-colonialism.
Absolutely, and that's where my research is picking up, because it's troubling that there's this kind of oversight of resource scarcity, because that is what teaches people the wrong thing, which is that the environment is renewable, and it is not. Okay, we are over time, so we should sign off.
Everyone's just leaving. They're like, these idiots need to stop talking.
It's like, someone said environment, now I'm here. So thank you all for joining. This has been super duper fun. I'm sort of stuck in this screen here for a second, but thank you all for joining. I'm gonna throw us to our symposium announcement screen real quick so that everybody can take a look at that. So Serious Play is hosting a symposium April 17th and 18th that is coming up in the next 10 days. We're going to leave you here with some information about that. Feel free to hit !symposium in the chat to get some information, and do the same thing, but do !symposium reminder if you want to DM with some deets. All right, thank you everybody. Thanks for hanging out. Looking forward to seeing you next time.